He thought she was just a security guard, a new face in a polo shirt. So when she stopped a 2-star general at the gate, he mocked her in front of hundreds. But what happened next? It left an entire SEAL team standing at attention, and forced a decorated admiral to salute her with tears in his eyes. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from all corners of the world. Let's get started. The polished black boots of Rear Admiral Mason Hayes tapped a sharp, irritated beat on the sun-drenched tarmac of Charleston Naval Base. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of salt and diesel, buzzing with the restless anticipation of the annual fleet commissioning ceremony. Hundreds gathered sailors in crisp whites, proud families waving tiny flags, and a lineup of distinguished guests. But Admiral Hayes wasn't taking in the fanfare. His cold, gray eyes had locked onto a single, inconvenient figure at the security checkpoint. A woman. She wasn't in uniform, just a civilian contractor, a new hire in his eyes. To him, she didn't belong. "This is General Carter," he snapped, motioning to the man beside him. "Your scanner is wrong. Let him through." The woman didn't budge. "Sir, protocol requires visual confirmation from the command post. It'll just be a moment." She wasn't rude. She was calm, firm. But to Admiral Hayes, a civilian telling him to wait might as well have been treason. Her name was Charlotte Lane. Most folks at the base just called her Charlie. She was quiet, average, a shadow in the background. Or at least, that's what they thought. Charlie Lane had been at Charleston Naval Base for nearly 4 years. At 43, she carried herself with a quiet rhythm, never rushing, never slouching. She wasn't one to gossip, didn't hang around after hours. And she always packed the same lunch, a turkey sandwich, apple, and a little folded napkin like it mattered. Everything about her was methodical, predictable, unremarkable. At least that's what most people assumed. She wore no uniform, no stripes, no rank, just a simple navy polo tucked neatly into khakis. A civilian security contractor, a fixture of routine, ghost-like. But Admiral Mason Hayes couldn't stand her. He saw in Charlie something he couldn't quite place, something that disrupted the tidy command structure he clung to. It wasn't anything she said. It was the way she moved, the way she watched everything with those clear green eyes, always seeing, always calculating. He'd tried to ignore her, but she kept reappearing. Not deliberately, more like gravity. The first clash came weeks before the ceremony. During a security briefing for a high-level NATO visit, she raised her hand. "In the proposed motorcade route, there's a 200-yard blind spot between the maintenance hangar and South Gate," she said evenly. "The camera tower has limited visibility due to the scaffolding work." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Hayes glanced down from the podium, unimpressed. He turned toward the base's master-at-arms. "Is that true?" The man shifted. "Technically, yes, sir, but the risk is considered negligible." "Negligible," Hayes repeated, cutting his eyes back to Charlie like she'd suggested a conspiracy theory. He gave a tight smile to the room. "Let's leave threat analysis to those who've actually worn a uniform. Shall we?" A few nervous chuckles followed. Charlie just nodded, expression unreadable, and sat down. The next morning, the route was changed. Quietly, without any credit given, and she never mentioned it again. The second time was more personal. Admiral Hayes was jogging his usual perimeter route at dawn when he spotted her crouched near the back gate, running her fingers along the chain-link fence. He slowed, irritated. "Everything to your satisfaction. Ms. Lane," he asked, his tone soaked in sarcasm. She didn't look up. "This tension wire has corrosion," she said. and the ground here is softer than the surrounding area. Could be a breach point. Hayes scoffed. That fence has held for years. Maybe go back to your booth and let the experts worry about fences. She said nothing. He jogged off. The following afternoon, a repair team showed up and reinforced that exact stretch of fence. It infuriated him. Every time she was right, it chipped away at the neat little world Hayes believed in, a world where authority flowed from medals and ribbons, not quiet eyes and scarred hands. And now, at the commissioning ceremony, she had embarrassed him again, right in front of brass, guests, and media. The general's ID had glitched. A clerical error. Not Charlie's fault, but she was the one who stopped him. And worse, she'd been right to do it. That was the final crack in his patience. So when she returned to foot traffic duty near the VIP stage, Admiral Hayes made his move. He walked straight over, heels clicking sharp against the pier's concrete, and stood inches from her. "I thought I made myself clear earlier," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "Your job is to be seen, not heard." She looked at him, not with defiance, not with fear, just that same calm stillness. "You are a civilian," he continued. "Temporary. You don't have the authority to stop a 2-star general or direct my personnel. This is my base. And as of now, you're done here." His voice rang across the pier. Dozens heard. Some turned away. Others stared. Charlie didn't flinch. Didn't argue. She simply gave a small nod and turned to leave. But as she walked away, a breeze from the harbor lifted her sleeve. And someone noticed the scar. The scar on Charlotte's forearm wasn't the neat, linear kind you'd expect from surgery. No, it twisted and puckered, a chaotic weave of damage that suggested violence. Metal. Fire. It was only visible for a moment. The wind caught her sleeve, lifted it just high enough for the people nearby to catch a glimpse. One of those people was Chief Petty Officer Logan Beck, a combat veteran who'd seen more than his fair share of shrapnel wounds in Kandahar. His gaze narrowed the instant he saw it. That wasn't a kitchen accident. That was war. Charlie pulled her sleeve back down without hesitation. The motion was practiced, natural. She didn't pause, didn't flinch, just kept walking. She passed a Marine gunnery sergeant posted near the ceremonial stage, and as she did, her collar shifted. He caught sight of something inked just below her neckline, a tattoo. Just the edge of it. Black, angular, not decorative, military. The shape was unmistakable to him. Raptor talons? He blinked, confused. That kind of marking didn't belong on someone working crowd control. It belonged to elite pilots, top tier, 5th-generation jet fighters. And this woman? She was walking away, quietly fired by an admiral who had no idea who he'd just dismissed. Then the world shifted. A tortured groan echoed across the pier. A screeching wail of metal grinding against metal, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy falling. Eyes snapped to the source, a mobile lighting rig near the main stage. Its hydraulic lift had failed. The whole structure, easily a few tons of steel and lights, was collapsing. Right toward the packed bleachers. Children, sailors, families. Panic erupted like a bomb. People screamed. Some ran. Most froze, unable to process what was happening. Even Admiral Hayes stood rooted, his mouth open, mind blank. But Charlie Lane moved. In an instant, she transformed. The civilian exterior peeled away like a mask, her limp gone, her soft presence replaced by something razor-sharp. Her voice tore across the chaos with an authority that silenced fear. Brace and cover. She didn't ask, she ordered, and people listened. She moved fast, fluid not toward safety, but toward the danger, calculating the angle of the falling rig like she could see the physics in mid-air. Her voice came again, loud, commanding. "Stage right against the bulkhead, move." She pointed to the steel side of a docked ship, the safest solid cover within reach. A group of VIPs stumbled to follow her direction. 2 young sailors were frozen in place, eyes wide, paralyzed. "You two get the children through that corridor now!" she shouted, jabbing her finger toward a maintenance access no one else had noticed. Snapped out of their trance. The sailors moved. Training kicked in. They began herding people through the side gate, out of harm's way. Then impact! The lighting rig slammed into the bleachers with a horrific crash. Twisted metal, shattered wood, a cloud of dust and screams. But not a single life was lost. Because she had moved. Because she had seen it coming. Because she had taken charge. When the dust settled, Charlie stood near the wreckage, helping an elderly veteran steady his wife. Her breath was even. Her posture straight, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. All around her, people stared, some in disbelief, others in awe. The SEAL team that had just arrived watched the scene unfold. Their commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cole, had taken notice of her even before the accident. He'd seen how she carried herself, the control, the stillness, the discipline. Now he was certain. "Chief," he said quietly to his senior NCO, "look at that woman. Really look." The chief did, then frowned. Cole's voice dropped to a whisper. One word, a name. Wraith. The name hit like thunder in the chief's chest. He turned sharply, staring at the woman near the fallen lights. No way. Couldn't be. And yet, it made perfect sense. The moment after impact was a strange kind of stillness, like time had paused to let everyone catch their breath. People stood in silence, staring at the shattered remains of the lighting rig. Only moments earlier, that section had been filled with children waving flags and sailors laughing with their families. Now it was wreckage. But because of one woman, no one had been hurt. Charlotte Lane stood at the edge of it all, her face unreadable, gently helping a little boy to his feet. He clutched a toy submarine in one hand and stared up at her like she was something out of a dream. His mother ran to him moments later, tears pouring down her face, pulling him close. Charlie didn't linger. She turned and moved on to the next, a woman who'd twisted her ankle in the rush. Then an elderly man, shaken but unharmed. No orders, no applause, just quiet service, focused, unshaken. And the pier watched. Admiral Mason Hayes hadn't moved. His chest heaved like he'd just sprinted a mile, though he hadn't taken a single step. He looked at the mangled metal, then at Charlie, the woman he had just fired in front of hundreds. His mouth opened, but no words came. That's when Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cole made his move. He stepped forward from the crowd with the kind of purpose that parted the sea of onlookers without a single word. His SEAL team fell into formation behind him. Silent, sharp, respectful. He didn't stop for rank, didn't salute the admiral, didn't pause. He stopped in front of Charlie. Her eyes met his calm, alert, yet somehow distant, like she was still calculating, still scanning. Cole stood at attention. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep and clear. "Permission to speak freely." Charlie nodded once. He stepped forward, lowering his voice, though the entire pier could still hear. "Admiral Hayes asked who you are," he said. Then he turned toward the frozen flag officer. "Sir, you're not just looking at a contractor. You're looking at Major Charlotte Lane, United States Air Force, retired." A stunned wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers filled the air like wildfire in dry grass. Admiral Hayes blinked, clearly disoriented. "Major," he repeated, as if trying to place the name in some file in his head. But Commander Cole wasn't finished. He turned back to Charlie, now visibly scarred, arm exposed, eyes locked ahead, and with reverence in every word, he spoke again. "Call sign, Wraith." Silence. Then something deeper than silence, reverence. For those who knew the name, it was like hearing a ghost speak. Wraith wasn't just a nickname. It was a legend, a whispered story from classified briefings and late-night war room conversations. One of the first and most elite female pilots to fly the F-22 Raptor into hostile airspace. Missions with no names. Coordinates erased. A survivor of a catastrophic ejection that, according to rumor, should have ended her life or at the very least, her ability to walk. And yet, here she was. Not in medals, not in glory, in a polo shirt, on a pier, helping people. Chief Beck, the man who had seen her scar, straightened his spine and raised his hand in a salute. Flawless. Sharp, unshakable. It was the signal. One by one, they followed. The SEALs, the Marines, the Navy sailors, the Air Force retirees, even a visiting Army colonel near the edge of the crowd. Salutes rose like a tide, not to a rank, not to a position, but to a warrior. Charlie didn't speak. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't bask in it. She just gave a small, respectful nod. Nothing more. Nothing less. It was enough. Admiral Hayes stood there, watching hundreds of service members raise their hands. Not to him, but to the woman he had dismissed as invisible. And for the first time in a long time, he understood what true authority looked like. Admiral Mason Hayes had always believed that control came from position, from the stars on your collar, the ribbons on your chest, and the silence that followed your orders. But now, as he stood surrounded by a sea of raised salutes, none of them directed at him, the foundation of that belief cracked. He watched as people of every branch stood at attention for a woman in a security polo and khakis, a woman he had dismissed, a woman he had humiliated, a woman whose quiet dignity had just saved dozens of lives. He had no script for this moment. Across the pier, Charlie Lane stood still, eyes lowered modestly, not seeking acknowledgement, not demanding praise. The authority she held didn't come from volume, it came from presence. She hadn't needed to shout anyone down or throw her resume around. She had simply acted swiftly, selflessly, without hesitation. Lieutenant Commander Cole stepped back and stood beside his team, giving her space, but keeping his eyes on her like a soldier ready to take orders if she so much as blinked. For a beat, no one moved. Then, finally, Admiral Hayes stepped forward. The air felt heavy. Every eye shifted to him, waiting to see what he would do. He stopped a few feet from her. "Major Lane," he began, the title catching awkwardly in his throat. She looked up, calm and steady. He swallowed, trying to find footing on ground that had shifted beneath him. I didn't know who you were." Charlie tilted her head ever so slightly. "Did you need to?" she asked softly. Not accusing. Just honest. Her voice held no anger, just a clarity that made him feel, for the first time in years, like a junior officer, again unsteady, untested. "I made a mistake," Hayes admitted. "A serious one, and I don't just mean at the checkpoint. I misjudged someone doing their duty. Someone who, frankly, I had no business judging at all." He looked around at the people still holding their salutes, then back at her. "You saved lives today. You took control of a crisis before anyone else even moved. You did it without rank, without a command, without hesitation. That's not just leadership, that's instinct." Charlie didn't respond. She didn't need to. "I owe you more than an apology," he continued, his voice quieter now. "I owe you thanks. And this base owes you its respect." There was a long pause. Then, slowly, Admiral Hayes raised his hand in a salute. Not the crisp, automatic salute of military protocol. This one trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from humility. It held. Charlie gave a soft nod, the same nod she'd given to every junior seaman, every child, every bystander on that pier. And then, she turned back to the families. She helped a young sailor find his wife in the crowd, handed a dropped phone to an elderly couple, checked on a little girl who had skinned her knee. No cameras, no spotlight, just work. That was Charlie Lane. But something had changed. From that moment on, she was no longer invisible. The next day, an official memo was quietly circulated from the Admiral's office. It didn't speak in grand terms or flowery words. It simply stated that Ms. Charlotte Lane would be offered a new position, Strategic Emergency Response Consultant to Base Security. A full-time role, with clearance and authority, no longer the ghost in the background. She read the offer once, then folded the paper neatly and tucked it into her bag, and went back to work. Not because she needed validation, but because she understood something far greater than titles. She didn't serve for recognition. She served because someone always had to be watching. In the weeks that followed, something subtle but profound shifted on the Charleston Naval Base. It wasn't announced. There was no ceremony, no banner with her name. But word spread, as it always does in tight-knit military communities. People began to look at Charlotte Lane differently. Before, she'd been easy to overlook, the quiet woman by the gate. Always early, never lingering. A ghost in khaki. Now, sailors stood a little straighter when they passed her. Young Marines held eye contact longer, unsure whether to salute her or thank her. Most didn't know the full story. Just whispers. Rumors. She used to be Air Force. She flew Raptors. They called her Wraith, saved a whole section during the ceremony collapse. But Charlie never confirmed or denied anything. She didn't seek clarification. She didn't correct exaggerations. She just kept doing her job, checking credentials, scanning perimeters, eating her sandwich in silence by the edge of the pier, always with that same unreadable paperback in her lap. But inside, something had shifted. Not pride, not ego. It was something quieter, softer. Peace. For years, Charlie had worn the burden of her past like a weighted vest under her civilian clothes. The crash that ended her flight career didn't just break bones, it fractured her identity. One moment she had been Major Charlotte Lane, F-22 pilot, leader, warrior. The next, she was a hospital file, a set of rehab appointments, a statistic. When she walked away from the Air Force, she'd believed that part of her life was over, that the world no longer had a place for what she used to be. So she had chosen to disappear. But on that pier, when she moved toward danger and the world moved around her, she realized something. She hadn't lost who she was. She'd simply buried it. And the moment called her back. Now, with her new consulting role quiet, unofficial, but real, she began walking the base with purpose again. She was invited to briefings, asked for input, listened to. At first, it felt strange, vulnerable. But then came the small moments that stitched something back together. A young female airman, newly stationed, approached her near the mess hall. Nervous. "Ma'am, is it true you flew Raptors?" she asked, eyes wide with curiosity and awe. Charlie didn't answer right away. She just smiled softly. "I flew what they told me to," she said. Then added, when it mattered. The girl grinned like she'd just met a superhero. Then there was the maintenance chief who quietly left a repaired thermos in Charlie's locker with a note, "For the long walks." Thanks for noticing what we didn't. Even Admiral Hayes changed. He didn't gush or apologize again. But now, when he passed her on the base, he greeted her with a respectful nod, a quiet acknowledgement between professionals. And maybe that was enough. Because Charlie didn't need parades. She didn't need to wear the uniform to serve. She understood something deeper now, that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off, and identity isn't tied to a title. Courage, after all, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, a steady hand, a calm voice, a refusal to look away when something's wrong. She wasn't trying to be Wraith anymore. She was simply trying to be useful. And in doing that, she found herself again. It was a quiet Tuesday when the change became undeniable. A light rain had settled over Charleston Naval Base. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of mist that made the pavement glisten and blurred the edges of the morning. Charlotte Lane stood at her usual post by the western gate, hood up, clipboard in hand. She wasn't meant to be there anymore, not officially, but she'd insisted on rotating in once a week. "Helps me stay sharp," she told the new security chief with a half smile. He hadn't argued. Across the lot, a young recruit struggled with a faulty pass scanner. Frustration bloomed on his face. Charlie watched for a moment, then walked over, speaking softly, pointing out the reset sequence. It worked. The recruit blinked, grateful. "Thanks, Major," he said, then quickly corrected. "Sorry. Miss Lane." But she just nodded, rain beating off her hood, and said, "Either works. I'm still me." That simple sentence held more weight than any salute. Charlie no longer flinched when someone used her rank. She no longer tried to erase it, hide it behind khaki fabric and silence. She had come to understand something many never get the chance to, that you can carry your past without being haunted by it. And now, the base had learned something too. They had learned that real strength doesn't always wear medals. Sometimes it wears scuffed boots and drinks coffee alone. Sometimes it walks with a limp, but moves like it still owns the sky. And most of all, they had learned to look twice at the quiet ones, the overlooked, the unassuming. Because Charlotte Lane had shown them what leadership looks like when no one's watching. What courage sounds like in the calmest voice in the room. A few weeks after the lighting rig incident, a framed photograph quietly appeared on the wall inside the base's crisis response center. It showed the wreckage from the ceremony, twisted lights, toppled chairs, and in the middle of it all, a woman standing tall, hand on a child's shoulder, giving direction through the chaos. There was no plaque, no name, just a small inscription at the bottom that read, "Not all warriors wear uniforms." Nobody had to ask who it was. They all knew. Lieutenant Commander Cole returned weeks later to thank her again. He brought a coin, a personal one. Not official. A token passed between those who've seen things most people never will. He placed it in her hand without ceremony. "Because I've never seen anyone take command like that," he said. Charlie studied the coin, then looked him in the eye. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "No, ma'am," Cole replied. "I get to—" She kept the coin in the inside pocket of her jacket, not to display, but to remember. Not the action, not the salutes, but the moment she chose to stop hiding who she had been. Because sometimes, the world doesn't need a hero in the sky. Sometimes, it just needs one at the gate. Courage isn't always loud. It doesn't always arrive in a uniform or announce itself with rank. Sometimes, it comes in the form of quiet consistency, someone who shows up every day, unnoticed, doing the right thing even when no one's looking. Charlotte Lane reminds us that dignity is not defined by title, and strength doesn't need permission to speak. We live in a world quick to judge, to assume someone's worth based on what they wear, how they talk, or where they stand in a hierarchy. But true power lies in character, in the quiet confidence of someone who acts with integrity not to prove anything, but because it's who they are. She didn't need validation. She didn't need revenge. She just stood her ground. And in doing so, she changed the hearts of everyone around her, not with noise, but with grace. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Share it with someone who needs a quiet reminder of strength. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.